Video games glorifying gun violence should not be banned. Exposure to violence does not create violence. There's often underlying causes, mental disorders, such as manic depression, bipolar disorder, neuroticism. These create a tendency towards aggressive behavior in youth on their own, not based on a video game. The Harvard Health newsletter of October 2010 also discusses the fallacies of these studies. The measures used to assess aggression in these studies doesn't actually correlate to real world violence. Also, these are observational studies which do not show cause and effect. By observing aggressive behavior in a child, um, you can't necessarily tell where that behavior comes from with an exact certainty. Federal crime statistics shows that violent crimes among youth have been decreasing since 1996, despite the rising popularity of video games. These games use a system of points and achievements and awards. This takes the focus off the violent aspect of the game, off the violent acts that they are committing. It makes it more of a form of competition among peers, competing for places in the status quo, a type of peer bonding. The newsletter also refers to it as virtual roughhousing, just as two boys would wrestle in person. They're just basically wrestling and roughhousing online. But because two boys wrestle in person, you wouldn't freak out and think that they were going to show aggressive behaviors later in life. They're just boys being boys. So why is it any different for the virtual world? Um, there's also so much violence in other media. How can it be pinpointed to just video games? Violence in movies, in television shows, in rap music, all sorts of music. Even in the violent stories that the news itself portrays. I mean, if we're going to censor video games, shouldn't we censor the news as well? Anything exposing our children to violence could lead to aggressive behavior by some people's arguments and their chain of logic. If it really is a problem, there are solutions other than government involvement. A lot of it could be parent involvement. Game ratings are there for a reason. If a game is rated M for mature, it should be a parent's job to step in and not allow their young, impressionable child to play that game. Um, Taking the consoles out of the bedroom, putting it in a more public place, not letting older kids share their mature games with their younger siblings or younger friends. Parents even playing the games with the kids. These are all solutions and steps that parents themselves can take to help kids understand that the violence in the games is not okay in the real world and help lead to a decrease in any aggressive behavior that would be shown. By limiting screen time and encouraging participation in sports, parents can also stop the problem of any video game addiction that might be happening. By taking the focus elsewhere, they're giving their child something else to focus on, other outside of a virtual violent world, if that's what they think it is. Um, there's also anti-violence programs in schools like SAVE, Students Against Violence Everywhere. They're a violence prevention program. And if more programs like this were instilled in middle schools and high schools, it would help students better translate the difference between the violent virtual fake world and the real world. Um, Video games are also protected under the First Amendment. That's just plain and simple. It's free speech. If you're going to censor video games due to violent content, you'd have to expand it into so many other areas, and the taxpayers don't have the time or money to fight that battle.